Hello, greetings, good morning. It is the one and only Dr. Times. I wanted to make a video with talking about just some of the more interesting interactions I've had since the desert. And the good news is I've taken notes, and just a simple page of notes. So this video should contain 50% less and probably about 25% less you knows. Something to look forward to. But I would be amiss if I was going to make a video about interesting interactions and start after the desert. Really, it should start in the desert with my my 7 seconds with God. There's no other way to put that phrase. Oh, there's one. You know, that's something I think about quite a bit. Not so much because of the company, but because of the state of consciousness. It was unlike any other state of consciousness I have experienced in this lifetime. It was a return to source. There wasn't... it is the only state of consciousness in which there were no defined visuals. It's the only state of consciousness where there was no real physicality to speak of. That's really what set that experience apart from, well, everything else I've ever experienced. It was just a different state of consciousness, and the voice of God is soundless and pure. I've described it that way before because, you know, when I hear my guides in my head, they have a voice, and it's not a voice of vibration like, you know, I'm using now to speak to camera, to speak to you. It's more of, I don't know, it's the words they use when I'm talking to them, they don't just have the meaning of the word to them. I mean, the best verb that I have to describe it is feel here, because, you know, they'll say something and I'll understand. Like, they never had to tell me that they were the name of the light. They never had to tell me that that meant not heavy as opposed to not dark. That was just, when I feel hear them, that's what they say. But the point I was trying to make here is, you know, even they have a direction. Like the voice, it has a source, whereas the voice of God, it was more, I was being vibrated. Like the words were being produced through my consciousness more so than being spoken at me. And, you know, even then it took me a long while to accept that it was a short conversation with God. I even had to ask about it at my QHHT session. If you've listened to that, kudos to you, because that's a silly voice they came up with. Yeah, it took me a while to really accept that's what happened, but that's what happened. Two things we will not be talking about in today's video is the entity that replaced my housemate and apologized for raping me. We've covered that one. It's in the Desert Stories, the Untold Vit, whichever video that was way back in the past. We will also not be talking about my mother, except for one interesting little email that I remember from that period where she was trying to convince me that I'd gone crazy. I remember she sent one email that said something along the lines of she would totally believe me if I said it was aliens because her ex-husband saw a UFO one evening on his way home from work, and there was a government employee standing there who told him never to mention it to anyone. I'm like, well, run that story by me again. He saw a UFO, and there just happened to be a government dude, like, on the ground near him at the time. Did he stumble into a festival? Yeah. Whenever the stories don't quite add up, there's a reason. So yeah, interesting interactions since the desert of a more physical, real type. I met a guy named Michael, who I had known before the desert. I've spoken a few times about the community pool here, which is a large source of my social interaction. But I met Michael up there, and I ran into him probably a day or two after the desert, after it was all shown to me. And one of the things, he started asking a whole bunch of questions about everything, and that very, looking for the cracks in your story to spin it all around. But one of the questions he asked me during that encounter was, well, what religion are you promoting? Now that you've found God, what religion are you going to promote? And I just kind of looked at him and went, no religion, like none. I had 6 seconds with God being agnostic my whole life. I'm certainly not going to go scoop up a religion. I'm not looking at my life now thinking, I need some dogma. This is pretty good, but we're going to add some dogma to it. No religion. And that was before I truly realized how religion in this reality is the ultimate form of controlled opposition. I mean, religion serves two main purposes. First of all, it's intentionally bad because it's trying to shove you into the cult of science. I mean, you notice how often these two things are played against each other in our society, religion versus science. And I've never understood, or I didn't understand, I should say, why these two things are always portrayed as at odds with each other. When, religion deals with one sphere and science deals with another sphere, there's not a lot of overlap. There's no reason for that conflict, but yet that conflict is constantly manufactured and promoted in our society. So religion is intentionally bad so that the people who aren't inclined to that sort of brainwashing, sorry, but that's the best word I got for it, will get pushed into the cult of science, which, as a logical left-brain person, is a very tempting religion, but still a religion. The other thing that religion does, and, well, there's an encounter later on that we'll get back to that second point when we get to that encounter. But another thing Michael asked me during that encounter that really stuck in my brain was, have you ever said fuck you to God? Which was a weird question to me. Like the idea, I obviously understand the question, but the idea of actually, personally attacking a God, or, God self. I try not to use the word himself, so I got to use strange words like God self. Never occurred to me. I have done 3.5 interviews about all this since it came to me. 3.5. My half interview was with whatever Coast to Coast AM is called these days, and I made a video shortly after that experience explaining what I went through. But it was basically, I called up and I gave a little spiel about what was going on. And the host asked how I came to know these things. And so I started to very quickly tell my story about how I'd become obsessed with conspiracy theory a couple of months earlier and found all these patterns and how 9/11 was key. And she really latched onto 9/11 and then just started defending the official story. And that was the end of the phone call, ended that conversation. As soon as I mentioned the work of Dr. Judy Wood, she hung up on me. Just literally, no, we don't want to talk about that. Click. I'm like, so this is the show about the paranormal, huh? It's totally not controlled opposition. The second interview I did was when I was on the streets. I met a guy around town who did some stuff for local TV and radio, and he asked if I wanted to come be interviewed for public access TV, which I'm like, yeah, I'm that kind of weirdo. I'm a public access TV kind of weirdo. Let's do it. Just knowing it's a trap. All of these interviews were basically traps in their way. And he asked me if I wanted to do it probably about an hour before it happened. He found me in a coffee shop that morning and took me in the studio. And I remember the first question he asked me in that interview. I don't know if this ever went on air. I never saw it. Wouldn't want to. First question he asked me was, so what is the history of the flat earth movement? I don't know. Like I'm sure it has a history, but to me it's divine insight combined with observation and geometry. I don't know the history, I just know the math. And the really painful part of that interview, which was totally intentional on his part, is that he would ask a question and I would answer it, and I would get to, the logical conclusion of the point I was trying to make, and then I would stop for him to react or do something, and he would just sit there. I'm like, like, this is not how an interviewer interviews, dude. Come on, feedback, talk to me. Give me something to work with here. And that had the horrible effect of just making me kind of off kilter and nervous, and I'd just keep talking because he wouldn't. So I would just be like, well, because I should say some more stuff about stuff. It was a pretty terrible interview. Although he did ask me in that, when I started talking about how there is a them in this reality, and they look human, and they are your friends, and they are your family, and they are everyone on TV. He asked me, well, do they live like normal lives? And at the time I said, I don't know, mostly because I was just so kind of frazzled by that point. But they do. I mean, they very obviously do live normal lives. I mean, it's the people they live lives similar to yours. I highly suspect they live a little extra, that their dream time isn't like ours. But that is mostly speculation. Mostly speculation on my part. No evidence there. The second interview I did was actually with a college kid with he had a journalism project, and that went well. He was a nice guy. He had awesome facial hair. I think his name it wasn't Alfonso, but it was close to that. I feel guilty. He was a nice guy. And like I said, excellent facial hair. Not like this craziness. Usually when I see people with overly groomed facial hair, I just think you missed the point of having a beard, dude. The point of having a beard is to not give a fuck. Like it's not to spend even more time on your face. It's to spend less time on your face. But his really worked. I really liked that. But yeah, he just kind of politely listened to my story and asked some questions. The only thing remotely strange or suspicious there was he asked me what my name was before, and I just told him it wasn't important. But, it's probably just an innocuous question. Strange part about that was it was a photojournalism project. And so he followed me around to some of the places around town that I kind of haunted and took pictures of me, which was, it's strange enough pointing a camera at myself and talking, knowing that people are going to be watching it. Having someone follow me around with the camera was, well, I just tried to ignore them for the most part. Seems like best plan. Although I did do one open mic where he was there kind of standing in front of the stage taking pictures of me as I spoke, and that did add a certain sort of, I don't know, paparazzi feel to it. I don't know. It's one thing to get up in front of a room of strangers and tell them that demons are real. It's another thing to do it with your own photographer. It was a little strange to me. The third interview I did was actually this year, and some guys contacted me on Reddit and asked me if I wanted to be a guest on their podcast, and I checked out their podcast, and it was, vaguely spiritual in nature. It was, young men trying to, ooh, there was it was young men trying to explore spirituality and understand their reality, the thing we're all been trying to do for so long. And I never shared it on my subreddit or anywhere, just because it was half, like, we did the interview, and it was half a story you've heard before, poorly told in a quick, condensed, probably jagged form. And then half the weirdest conversation you could possibly imagine. I mean, that conversation got so weird. At the end, it was something, they were asking me questions along the lines of, how can you believe these things are true? One of the questions was, how can you believe this is true when so many people do not? Like, well, because repetition isn't truth, and most people haven't figured that one out. It took me long enough myself, so I can't hold that against them. But that's how I can believe things that most people don't, because, truth is truth. And if you're not living for the truth, then what the fuck are you living for? But yeah, the questions just got to the point. There was like, how can you believe your seatbelt will do anything for you and believe in these things? It's like, what? I don't have an answer to that question, because I don't understand your point A to point Z. So I never shared that. And they were ex-Jehovah Witnesses. I think that was either the theme of their podcast or just the two guys I was talking to. I'm not quite sure, but they'd very much fallen into that religion versus science trap of, religion was so bad and science was just waiting patiently to catch them as they ran away from religion. And they kept objecting, or at one point they objected to my repeated use of the phrase, this reality. Like, why do you keep saying this reality? I mean, are there others? Like, well, yeah. I mean, look how wacky this reality is. What are the odds that this is I mean, even if, just look at the world we live in, what are the odds that this wackiness would be the only reality that you get to experience? What are the odds? What are the damn odds? I'm gonna get that tattooed right across my face. What are the damn odds? Oh, this is where I'm subtly checking my time. 17:55. I haven't even got to the second half of the page. Okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna finish up. We're gonna do part 2 in a more condensed form. Living on the streets, being a homeless bum, doing a lot of open mics. Loved it, had a lot of fun, talked about that before. There was one night at Abbey Underground that I uploaded to YouTube but never made public, because there was someone just in the back, and Abbey was the kind of place that actually had a proper stage with proper lighting, which, if you've never been in that situation, means you can't see the audience because the lights are too bright. I mean, like on a proper, on a properly lit proper stage, you don't really see the audience just because the lights are all on you and you can't see past the lights. So there was just this voice in the dark yelling noise at me in the middle of my spiel. And the first couple of times he did it, I would acknowledge the noise and then move on. And then he just kept going, because they are very persistent. They're very patient and very persistent little fucks. And I just started ignoring him and just going on with my spiel like he wasn't there. But which didn't deter him at all. He just kept going, and I finally just got to the point that I was just staring. I just stopped talking and started staring in his general direction. Like, do you realize you're emphasizing my points here? Like, this is when they come after me online. I'm like, do you realize you're making yourself more obvious here? Oh, I've not had a serious conversation online with them in a long time. Because I don't. There was good old Thing 1 and Thing 2 at another one of those open mics, and they could not have talked over each other any faster. It was like me talking about 9/11. It was just, I remember one of them screamed out, that building fell because it was designed that way for hurricanes. I'm like, you really think people design skyscrapers to implode upon themselves in the case of a hurricane? Like that sounds logical to you? Like, hey guys, we're gonna build a 110-story skyscraper, but if we see any hurricanes, this thing needs to just implode upon itself at free fall collapse. That's a wise architecture decision. There was another guy who I was talking to about 9/11. It was him and one of his friends I met outside of a coffee shop. And it was a very civil conversation. It was interesting, but when I started talking about, you know, the towers going down, he quickly adapted this mindset of, well, I'm not a structural engineer, so I don't have an opinion. I'm not a structural engineer, so it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter, you know, and that's cult mentality. You know, don't trust you, trust us. That's cult mentality. And it's the kind of cult mentality that's just pervasive. You know, that's how the religion of science gets away with all its lies. It's, you know, we're the experts. Oh, well, if you want to understand, you need to and read all this. Other interesting interactions. I guess to talk about the twins. The twins were a lot like Thing 1, Thing 2, except they were, you know, twins instead of just two random people. I met them at one of the bars. When you're homeless and you got a lot of time to kill, hanging out at the bar, that's what you do. I didn't really drink, had a 1-a-day limit, but it was pretty easy. You could just sit there and people would offer them to you. So if I wanted to get a little too drunk, which I did on my birthday and later regretted, you could. But yeah, the twins, I'm just like random guys sitting in the bar. I just had a usual routine of, you know, hey, I just came to town. I don't really know anybody. Do you mind if I join you here? And Denton's such a happy little friendly place that everyone would say yes. The only time anyone said no, please don't join us, was some couple having a serious conversation about their relationship. So I'm thankful they turned me down. Certainly didn't want to sit down on that. But the twins, they were like, so what's your story? I'm like, oh, I'm a bum, just living on the streets. And I got a bad vibe off these people as soon as I sat down, so I did not go into any of my usual spiel. I'm like, yeah, I'm a bum, just living on the streets, talking to people about spirituality. And they basically just both started going apeshit about, where'd you get your food? You know, I eating at the soup kitchen down the street. You are taking hard-earned money off other people by eating that food, and how didn't you bum a cigarette from us? We had to buy those cigarettes with our jobs, and just like two at a time. It was like one on each side of me. Interesting about the twins is I asked them if they were human, and they could not say yes. They did that same kind of panic. We're gonna talk about Jesus Man, who was hilarious. I was just sitting out on Fry Street, which is kind of, well, when I lived in Denton the first time forever ago, it was where all the coffee shops were, and there was, you know, a club at the end where I saw a lot of live music. Rick's Place, yeah. You know, it used to be just kind of a happening little place of town, and Denton's not a big city. It's a college town, very much so. So it was only, you know, a couple of blocks, this street, but it's kind of where you went. Well, anyway, I was hanging out there my last time back, and this guy sits down next to me, and wow, I wish I remember how he introduced himself or how it all got started, but he just started screaming at me about Jesus. He was one of those people. With his lovely little wife standing quietly behind him the whole time. I'm just standing there like, kind of looking at her thinking, you're married to this? All right. I can't find a girlfriend to save my life, but this guy's got one down. I must be doing something wrong. But yeah, he was very much controlled opposition. I mean, I can't use that. My guys don't like that phrase, but I like that phrase because I feel it you know, it describes so well Have you ever looked at someone with lust in your heart? I'm like, yes, I'm doing that right now, sir. He's like, I know you're joking. I'm like, no, I'm not joking. You think I'm a sarcastic ass online? You try pulling this shit in person, you'll see some sarcastic assery. But those kind of people, it's the other role of religion that I was alluding to earlier. Of if you don't want people to believe in subject X, you present people who scream we believe in X, who are raving assholes. I mean, this is classic tactics 101 here. And you see this theme repeated with creationism, faith healing, the anti-vaxxer movement, flat earthers. I mean, you see this same kind of, oh yes, we believe this, and we also believe in, I don't know, something even more crazy. It's, you step back and you look at the language of this society, of our culture, and so much of it is a clever double bluff. Just think about the phrase, so you believe in the Mandela effect. Think about what that sentence is really saying. That sentence is saying the Mandela effect is a subjective thing that you can choose to believe in. When it's not. It's an objective change. It's demonstrably an objective change. There's no belief, You have faith that there used to be liquid in this cup. But I don't have faith that there used to be liquid in this cup because I know there used to be liquid in this cup. I drank it. That's, there's no belief required. But it does make a good beat. I have no rhythm. What were we talking about? The twins. We're talking about Jesus Man. That's right. That's pretty much all I had to say about Jesus Man. There was one thing I wanted to say about Carl, who I've talked about in the last video, who went super friendly, hot, cold, just the classic routine of, I'm going to be buddy, I'm your friend, silence. Just, I have nothing to criticize you about, so I'm just going to leave you with silence, so you have to wonder about it. Classic them. But back when he was doing his I'm your friend friendly routine, when we were first hanging out, we were sitting in his backyard, and I told him, about my summer. That was my perspective. I was like, let me tell you about my summer. And I just, told him about getting there and going to the desert and what happened and the revelations afterwards and the understandings and yada, 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 the best I could to what I was hoping was an old friend. And when I finished giving my spiel, the first thing he starts talking about is math, is number theory and set theory, and about how the number one is nothing but the mathematical representation for this concept of a set of one thing. And it was, it was interesting from a, mathematical, logical, it was an interesting point he was making. He actually has a doctorate in math and teaches it for a living. Totally are educators. What can you do? It was an interesting spiel, but it was such a weird response to, I talked to God and got shown the true nature of my reality. That it's always stuck with me, especially after he pulled the whole, silence, not talking to you anymore. Why did you give me that spiel, Carl? What was its quiet alternative purpose? And, I know it's silly. I know fingers don't fing, but do numbers numb? Sometimes the clues are just right there on the name, just sitting right there. I don't have an answer for that one. Do numbers numb? I think these symbols, I know these symbols mean more than we're told, and may influence us in some way. It's really hard to say. It's pretty obvious that the numbers 9 and 11, there's so much effort between terrorism and emergency numbers to focus fear on that number, that there must be a reason. But I wanted to end this video with my absolute favorite response. And let's see if I have any. When I was living on the streets, I had flyers that I would hand out. First I had business cards, but they were a little too crazy. they were a little too much like what you'd find, yeah, just crazy. A little too demons are real. The flyers I made were a little bit more, everything you know is wrong, the earth is flat, that sort of thing. And there was this older guy, and I realized real quickly talking about these things that I just don't talk about it with people older than myself. I just didn't. They're, you know, they're set in their ways, they've been in this reality long enough, and they're just gonna look at me and think, sure kid, whatever. So, you know, save my breath, just talked, when I was living on the street, I was talking to the college kids mostly about these things, who were very receptive. You know, obviously not all of them are gonna believe these things. And most of them were very polite, and that's all I really ask. Don't be a dick. But there was this one older guy who I'd hung out with, you know, very casually. I'd run into him at the coffee shop and be like, oh, you know, that's how Denton is. You see a lot of the same people, so you just kind of befriend them all and hang out with whoever happens to be out and about. And, oh man, I wish I could remember his name. But anyway, so I'd hung out with this guy, spoken to this guy on several occasions before, and it's just, you know, your typical friendly banter with conversations. And I remember one evening, just like the week before I left town, I was talking to that guy again, and he asked me, you know, well, something along the lines of, you know, what's your deal, or something. You know, my mission came up, basically, and I never shied away from it. I just wouldn't bring it up with people like him. And so I handed him one of the flyers. This is me handing a flyer. There's been way more than 5. I handed him a flyer, and it just the change in his expression, he just went from friendly and open to just, and I sat there and I just waited. Like I was so amazed by his reaction that I didn't want to interrupt his reaction. I was gonna wait. I just wanted to sit there and wait for his reaction to happen. I mean, it's like every process in his brain just. So there you go. Those are some of the stranger / more interesting interactions I've had. Oh, and then there was the wonderful day I was in Spot A hanging out with some of the kids, and I was like, you know, I haven't run into any of my ex-girlfriends in town, and I'm pretty all right with that. And then I went to Spot B, and well, guess who was there? One of my ex-girlfriends. And I'm like, how are you doing? No coincidences in this reality. You're right on time. She wasn't friendly. Who's not surprised? Everybody. Stay tuned. We love you all. We'll see you next time. Next time there's a video. I don't know when I get the urge to talk about certain things, but there aren't many videos. There aren't many writings. I've kind of told you everything I have to tell you. It's just the same things I got told. It's your friends. It's your family. Yeah, the earth is flat. This reality isn't what it seems. Fear it. Fear it. No, don't fear it. Laugh about it, because it's all ridiculous. Embrace the absurdity. Dance, sing, be joyful, and know when you meet those angry people who are trying to create doubt or fear in your life, know that there's a purpose and agenda behind that doubt and fear, and go, ha ha, I'm onto the game. We love you all. Stay tuned.